Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Chof in Baba Kama, as we learn for Achenokol Basis Rohan Asun Basar B'Shivya. Right from the top of the page, continuing the discussion. If an animal ate some food, Rishus Hayachid, where he's chayiv, in other words, in the Rishus of the Nizik, of the one who's damaged, and he also did some other damage incidentally. So we said if he did it incidentally and with something that you wouldn't normally do, for that you only have to pay Chatzi Nezek. Unless he ate it all at the same time, was considered one big action. Okay, so the Gemara said it depends on the situation, etc. Here's another example. Ahu Barcha, there was a goat. The Chazal lifted saw some turnips on the top of a jar or a barrel. He saw some there at the top at the lip, the opening of the cask. Sarach, he climbed up the barrel. Solik, and he went up. Ochla lift, he ate the turnips. He broke the cask. He broke the jar, the barrel. He broke it. So Chayve Rava Alifta V'Adan Nosasham. And Rava was Machayev, the owner of the goat, to pay not only for the turnips, obviously it was in Rishus HaNizik, but also he had to pay full price for the barrel or the jar, whatever it was that he broke. My time, given the Urchel Mechel, if the since a goat like that normally eats turnips. So it's normal for him to go up on top of the jar, the barrel, and therefore he broke it incidentally, but it was part of the eating process. So since he had to pay Nezek Sholim for shame for eating produce of the owner in the owner's rishus, so he's also chayiv to pay for the barrel that he broke. That was part of the eating process. Amar Ilfa. Let's say an animal's walking in the Rishus Harabim. In the Rishus Harabim, you're not chayiv on shein v'regel, only Rishus Yachid. But here, the animal stuck its neck out and ate from the load. There was two animals there. Number one was walking along and had some food on its back, had a package of food. Number two came along, stuck out its neck, and ate for the food from the back of number one. Chayvus, he has to pay, even though normally these animals are allowed to walk in Rishus Harabim, and you're not chayiv for shein Rishus Harabim. My time, Gabi Chavertek, the back of the other animal is like the chutzner of the nizik, even though he's walking Rishus Harabim, but on his back it's like his private property. I'm allowed to drive my car in Rishus Harabim, but in my car it's my own Rishus. And the same thing with on the back of the animal, it's like chutzner and nizik, and therefore. It's like animal number two did damage in the territory, in the premises of the nizik of the animal number one and its owner. Therefore, he had to pay, even though he's in Rishus Harabim, he did the damage in the chutzner nizik. Let's prove a case from here. Let's say a man was walking along and he had a big sack packed, or box on his back. He was like carrying on his back. While he was walking in the street, an animal stuck its neck out and reached into the sack on the back of this guy. So that's the same thing because he's eating effectively in the Rishus HaNizik. Gemara says, no, that's no proof. That's speaking of a kofetzes, like Rava says in a different case that we'll see now what that other case was. Something where the animal jumped up on the guy's back. That's already a tolda of Karen because he did something unusual. Right? Rashi says the top line of the page, and that's a total just like over there, it's talking about the animal did something unusual, and therefore he's chayiv chatzin. That's what we're speaking about here. Where did Rava say they were talking about a case where the animal jumped at something unnatural, unusual, and therefore you're chayiv for chatzin? Even just remember, we discussed this before that the Karen. You're chayiv when an animal did something unusual and intentionally did it. You're chayiv both in Rishus Harabim and Rishus Yachid. So it makes no difference. It's not the idea. We want to prove that if one animal walking in Rishus Harabim ate from another animal's back, also in Rishus Harabim, we said before Ilfa said that the animal who did the damage is chayiv for shein, even though it's in Rishus Harabim, because the back of the first animal that has the load and the food is considered Rishus HaNizik. You can't prove it from this case of a man walking along and had some food on his back and an animal stuck its head out and ate from there, because here it's speaking about where the animal jumped up on him and did something unusual, and you're chayiv for Karen, not for shame. Karen's chayiv even Rishus Rabban. Behechid Rabba said, aha. Instead of this case, some Rabboshi behave Rishus Rabban. An animal was in Rishus Rabban. While he was walking, he ate. He ate food there. Well, Shane Rishus Rabban is potter. But if he stood, he stopped still and ate, and he's chayav. What's the difference? How is it different? Why in a case where he's walking along, that's usual, and Shane Rishus Rabban is potter. If he stood also, if he's walking along or he stood, either way he's eating Rishus Rabban. That should be considered usual, and therefore Shane should be potter. Rav Kafet says the case where he's standing means where he's not walking along normally. He jumped up and ate. He jumped up. That's considered unusual. Therefore, it's a told of Karen, not of Shane. Shane is only chayav Rishus Yachid. Or according to Ilfa, even on the back of another animal is also Rishus Yachid. But over here, these cases are talking about where the animal did something unusual. That's a told of Karen. He's chayav Chatzinezik. The animal's a time. Boy, Rav Zera. There is this interesting question. We've said that Shane is only chayav Rishus Yachid, not in Rishus Rabban, right? Only if you're in the Nizik's Rishus, not in Rishus Rabban. What happens if the food is rolling from one to another? In other words, the animal, let's say, is Rishus Rabban, and he rolled it from Rishus Yachid into Rishus Rabban. So is he potter because he's eating it in Rishus Rabban, or do you look at the place where it started? What happens if he rolled it? Mao. So what's the case? Going to Kaima Amir Rishus Yachid. Let's say you have a bundle of straw in the Rishus Yachid, become a skalgal, and the animal rolls it from Rishus Yachid, becomes a skalgal, Rishus Yachid, Rishus Rabban. So what do you say there? Do you look at the fact, well, he ate it in Rishus Rabban, or do you look at the original placement? And Rashi points out, and other Meforshim also say that that's how they learn the case. Here he says on the side, and it gives the Ram and the Rabbit that the food, let's say, was Rishus Yachid, where he became a skalgal, Rishus Rabban, Rishus Yachid. In other words, the kaima b'shus yachid, the animals of shus yachid, and he's rolling the food from a shus rabban to shus yachid. What you say is chayav. Rashi also says that you could learn the case either way. Rashi has the gears like we have in our Gemara that it's speaking about where the bundle is in shus yachid, where he b'chayav he ate it, but the animals are shus rabban, and he rolls it there. What do you look at the place that he ate it, or do you look at the place where it originated? What's the halacha there? Ask Rav Zera. Yeah.
Maybe it's carrot. Is it something unusual
for him to roll it?
Then so you don't be high of chetzinah.
That's a good point. He did something rolling it. Could be, but it could. Here the issue is we're not talking about the rolling. The rolling, he didn't do any damage when he rolled it. In other words, the issue always is that if he did something unusual in the act of damage or shame. But over here, he didn't damage it when he rolled it. The issue is simply shame. Is he chai for shame or not chai for shame? Because here the issue is that he ate it. When he ate it normally. But first he rolled it. That's the question. So Tashma, the Tani Rav Chia, Masui, Mixus, let's say you have a package that's partially bifnim, partially inside the Nizik Shushim, Mixus B'chutzim, partially outside. Achla bifnim, chayavas. In other words, we're assuming that he's rolling it. And he ate it. If he ate it while it was inside, he's chayav. Achla b'chutz p'tur. In other words, you look at where he ate it. If he ate it inside, he's chayav. If he ate it on the outside, he's potter. My love miskal gavasi. Are we speaking on a case where he's rolling it? So if when he rolled it, he ate it in the Rishus, before he rolled it, he ate it in the Rishus Yachid, he's chayav. If he rolled it out, he's potter. So you look at where he ate it, it's more low. Ema ochla al mashe b'pnim. You look at where it was originally. If he ate something on which was originally inside, he's chayav, even if he ate it in Rishus Rabban. Amash b'chutz, if he ate something that was originally outside, Torah. You could learn it either way. In other words, there's no proof. We're trying to determine, do you look at the place that he ate it, or do you look at the place where it was originally placed before he moved it? You can't prove it from here because you could learn the case either way. It makes a difference. If it was placed there, it's mashma from the portion that is speaking where he moved it. Rashi is not clear, but the Mefarshim, the way they explain it is that he moved it, but it seems to me it doesn't really make any difference. If the animal didn't move it and he found it in Rishus Rabban, it's probably more likely to say that he's potter. But it's mashma from Mefarshim that he moved it. Shegilgal as kula, right? Shegilgal as kula, he moved it with him, right? Moving from chayv gilgal, it's ptura. So it's mashma. The animal did it. Yeah, Avram's question would be, wouldn't it be a kashnizik? But he didn't do any damage then. In other words, if when he jumped up on the guy's back and he ate it, you could say that was he did the damage or the eating in an unusual way. Over here, he ate it in the usual way, but prior to that, he moved it. So the question is, what do you look at? So you can't prove it from here either way. Somewhere you could say, Kikam Rav Chia, the case that Rav Chia was talking about, that if it was partially inside, partially outside, it depends if he ate it inside or outside, but psila dastafta. Psila means a wick usually, but it means like a kind of a grass, aspasta, that has got long stalks and has different heads. So if you eat it on the inside, what he means to say is, if you ate it on the inside, you're chayev for the whole thing inside, even if part of it was sticking outside, because when you ate it inside, the whole stalk comes along with it. So it's like you have different parts of a vegetable or a flowers or whatever that are attached, and if you ate the part that's inside, it pulls the part that's outside with it, and vice versa. So you can't. It's not even talking about a case of rolling. You could talk about a case where it was one long stalk, and the question is, did he eat it inside or outside? So what Chia said was, and it had different heads to it. The stalk had heads, different heads attached to it. Some was inside, some was outside. If he ate it inside, he's chayev, even on the ones that were originally outside, because it goes by where he ate it from, or the ones outside. But it's not a case of rolling. So in the case of rolling, we really can't prove that. Can't prove this. Now the Mishnah said, if you look back on yesterday's Mishnah on Shane, said that when he chayev, whether it's a chayev first or a behema, eats things that he normally eats. Let's say he ate clothing. Animals don't eat clothing or kalim. Then mishalim chatzinesik, because that's unusual. That's not shame. Okay. Then he said medromor b'shasanizik. When he chayev b'shasanizik, b'shasarabim your potter. When he says your potter, what is that going on? That going on the fruits that he normally eats, or is it going even on the clothing? If the animal ate clothing, b'shasarabim, is he also potter there? Or do you say no? That's mishuna Karen, then you're chayev for that. Chayev chatzinesik on a tam. Ahaya. So when we say over here that Rishus Harabim, you're potter, what are you talking about? Which case are you potter on? Says Rashi, or asks the Gemara. But this one we say that Rishus Harabim, you're potter. Is it going on even if he ate clothing Rishus Harabim, which is a shinui, should be a told of Karen? What's it going on? So Ahaya. So we have machlokas. Amara, Ahaya. Which case is it going potter? Amarav Akulu. You're potter on everything. In other words, if an animal ate something, even if he ate something unusual, which should be a told of Karen, you're potter. My time, call a meshano bo achar b'shina bo potter. Leaving your clothes in Rishus Harabim is a strange thing, right? So if I left let's say I left stuff in Rishus Harabim, what was I expecting? Of course you're I did something weird. If I left something weird there, yeah. If we're walking along, you're walking along and I'm walking along with my animal, and my animal does damage to yours, I didn't do anything unusual. Your animal did something unusual. That's Karen. You have to pay. But over here, who leaves their clothing or their kalim in Rishus Harabim? So he lives like this. Call him Mishana. Anybody who did something unusual, and somebody else did something unusual to that, you left your clothing in Rishus Harabim. My animal came along and did something unusual to your clothing by eating it. Well, you know what? You're the one who started this by putting it there. Therefore, you're potter. My time we call him Mishana ba'achar b'shina ba'potter. That's Rav's opinion. Shmuel says no. This is your potter on Rishus Harabim is only regular shame. If he ate fruits and vegetables that he normally eats, the animal eats. You're chayiv for that because that's something unusual, told of carry. You're chayiv chatzinesik or nesik shalom, depending if the animal's a tam or mu'id. Rish Lakish goes like Rav Akulu. You potter on everything. Rish Lakish gives a similar answer to what Rav said, that if the first guy did something unusual, second guy's not responsible. Here's the case. Two animals are both in Rishus Harabim, two cows. Cows are normally allowed to be there, but achas ravutza, one is lying down. You shouldn't have your animal lying down in Rishus Harabim. Rishus Harabim is a place for people to travel. So the first animal, number one, is lying down. One's walking. If the one that's walking along kicked the other one, now kicking would be, and he did damage to it, would be a told of Karen, something unusual. If he did it intentionally, be a told of Karen. So you think that he should be chayav, but he says you're potter over here. You're potter because the animal shouldn't have been lying down. Animal number one shouldn't have been lying down in the street. Ravutza b'malachas. Let's say the animal that was lying down kicked the one that was walking. Well, then you're chayiv because the animal lying down shouldn't have kicked. But this is that he had kicked, and the other guy wasn't doing it. The other animal number 2 wasn't doing anything unusual. So Rish Lakish again goes with similar idea to what Rav said, that if the first guy did something unusual, there we were talking about putting your clothes, leaving your clothes to Shesarabim. Here Rish Lakish is talking about you put your animal down to lie down in Shesarabim, then he got hurt. Too bad. Rabbi Yochanan goes like Shmuel, Lo Shalom Peres V'Yirakos, only Pater B'Shesarabim on regular fruits and vegetables, Ksus V'Kalim, but things like that, if your animal ate clothing, that's unusual. Chayiv. Lamer Rabbi Yochanan less than Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't hold the Rish Lakish. Normally he argues the Rish Lakish, right? Sometimes he does agree. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't hold of Rish Lakish in the case of the 2 animals in Rish Hashanah, that if the standing animal damaged the lying animal, you're putter because the lying animal shouldn't have been there. No, I feel b'shtei paros. Lamer Rabbi Yochanan less than Rish Lakish. I feel b'shtei paros is low. Lola mislay. In the case of the paros, he agrees with Rish Lakish that if animal number 1 was lying down, had no business lying down, animal number 2 walked about and kicked it, the animal number 2 is not a chayiv because the first animal had no business lying down. So why does he agree with Shmuel and disagree with Rav in the first case of the animal eating the clothing? I'll tell you why. Because people leave their clothing sometimes. Sometimes person's walking along, he's sweating, takes off his jacket, leaves in Rosh Hashanah, and to get some air, took off his jacket, and therefore it's not totally unusual for a person to leave his clothing in Rosh Hashanah. Therefore, he says that if your animal ate susfikalim, that's Karen. That's not a told. That's a Karen. It's a told of Karen because he did something unusual, eating my clothing. You say I did something wrong by leaving my clothing with Shesarabim. No, sometimes you take off your jacket, put it down for a few minutes while you catch your breath. Whereas putting your animal down for a nap in the middle of Shesarabim, that's totally wrong. So therefore, he puts his clothing down and airs himself out, gets some breath. It's not normal to put your animal in that situation. So he agrees with Reish Lakish that if you put your animal lying down in Shesarabim, another animal came along and kicked it, the kicking animal is not responsible. But in the case of an animal eating my jacket in Shesarabim, that's unusual. That's a tolda of Karen. So if the animal a tolda of Karen, even though if he ate my peiros b'shesarabim, then he's potter because Shane is only chayiv b'shesayachid. But if he ate my jacket b'shesarabim, that's a told of Karen.
The lying animal doesn't become a boar.
Yeah, it could be. So if a lying animal is a boar, so you're asking it shouldn't be a told of Karen, it should be a told of boar. And if the first animal, if he damaged it, but here he kicked it. So in other words, the case is Ravutza Baleches. So the Ravutza kicked the other animal. We presume that's a told of Karen because he did it intentionally and he went out and he did damage. If let's say you're right, if let's say the animal that was lying down, another animal tripped over it, then you could argue that would be a told of boar, correct? Because the characteristic of boar is that it doesn't move around. Even if it does move around, but it moved around by causing passive damage, right? It was passive, not passive damage. It was passively doing damage as opposed to kicking the other animal in this case. Misha said, though, that if let's say the animal, again, going back to a regular case of fruits, you had your fruits in Rosh Hashanah, right? You had your fruits in Rosh Hashanah. And we said, well, if your fruits were on another animal's back, and the first animal, the damaging animal, ate the fruits off the other guy's back, you could say that's Rosh Hashanah. But let's say it wasn't like that. Let's say you just left your fruits in Rosh Hashanah for a minute, and an animal came along and ate them. The animal that ate them is potter. The owner of the animal ate them is potter because Shane is potter. That's what animals do. You had no business leaving your fruits in Rosh Hashanah. Okay, but let's say after the eating animal, the animal that ate the fruits, the owner doesn't have to give him lunch because he just ate fruits and vegetables, right? So that, the Mishnah said, he does have to pay for that. And then if the animal Now doesn't have to you don't have to serve him lunch. In other words, he got some pleasure from it. Mishonas, he has to pay Mashanas, he has to pay for what he had enough from. But of course, the question is, how much is that? The Kama says the Gemara. He pays. What does he pay? The fruits are, let's say, are worth $10. What normally does a man feed his animal? Straw costs 50 cents. So he'd have to give him the 50 cents. I don't have to feed him with 50 cents worth of straw now. So you give him 50 cents for his $10 of fruit. So Rav Omer Demei Omer, the value of a bundle of straw, just like 50 cents. Rav Omer Demei Sorim B'Zol. Animals, if a man wants to treat his animal to a nice lunch, he might give him barley, not straw. He'll give him barley. So he says, give him barley at a cheaper rate. Rashi explains that's 2/3 of the regular market rate. In other words, he might say, there was a sale at Target on barley, barley food for the animal, and down it was 2/3. So he used to give him that because he would, maybe sometimes he treats his animal to something a little bit better. But only that, and he doesn't have to pay that. So the barley, let's say, is worth $1 instead of 50 cents worth. So give him $1. They don't pay $10 for the fruits and vegetables. Tanya Kvasei Rabba. Tanya Kvasei Rabba is a proof to both. There's a price of like each one. Tanya Kvasei Rabba. Shim Yechayomer Ein Mishalmin Elo Demei Omer Bilvad. You just pay for the value of a bundle of straw. Tanya Kvasei Rabba in the Hennes Mishal Masha and Hennes. If he had pleasure, the animal got pleasure. He doesn't have to eat lunch now because he just ate the lunch. He ate the fruits and vegetables in the Rishus Harabim. He's potter again to pay the $10 because it's Rishus Harabim, but he has to pay because he did have pleasure from it. So Imnanis Mishlamas Mashas Kate said, Ochla Kava Kavan, if he ate a cup or 2 cups, those are measures. Ein Omrim Tashlum Demeim. You don't say you pay the value of what he ate. How much would you want to give something? Okay, your animal did eat a good lunch. How much would you like to pay for your animal to eat something a little bit better? Even though he normally eats straw, but once in a while you would treat him. How much would you pay to give him a little bit of a better meal, like sorum? Therefore, that's what you have to pay. So we have this machlokes between Rabbah and Rava. Right? Rabbah says the cheapest thing, straw, and Rabbah says no, you give him something a little bit better, but he would sometimes treat his animal. Therefore, but that's only if he had no, and as he got something good out of it. Meaning he ate, even though he ate the fruits which he doesn't normally eat, but he got some pleasure out of it because he doesn't have to feed him straw, it doesn't have to feed him barley. But let's say let's say he ate wheat, which is not good for the animal. The animal ate wheat, that might do him no good at all. And he might have to still eat his regular meal of straw or barley. Davar Aralo gave him something bad, then you're potter. Because that's not enough. You gave him something bad. What do you mean? What are you feeding this animal? If you feed your animal that eats straw, you gave him meat or something like that, even something that's worth a lot of money, but it's bad for the animal, you're potter from paying. It's only if the owner got some pleasure from the food that his animal ate Rishus Ram. He doesn't have to pay for damaging it, so he doesn't have to pay the $10 value of the fruits. But if he did get pleasure because he can skip lunch now and he got something good out of it, he should pay that according to Rabbah or according to Rabbah. Now this gets into the question of Hanoah. What do we mean? Amalei Rav Chisda of having Hanoah and where you're not necessarily doing damage. What do we mean by that? The question of Zenahen of Zelochasa. Amalei Rav Chisda Rav Mecham. Listen to the story. Rav Chisda said to Rav Mechama, Lohavas Gabon board, you weren't with us last night, but Tchuma in the area means in the area you weren't near us, or Tchum to mean the base medrash. You weren't in the base medrash. The Aruch says it's the base medrash. Rashi brings that down. Oh, second shot. You weren't with us last night when a very interesting question was raised. Lohavas Gabon to Betchuma. The boiler Milig Maya said we have a very good question, a very interesting question, and you weren't there to debate it. Amar Ma'imil Yasas or Ramcha said, what's the interesting thing you raised? Amalei. Famous question. I took lodging. This could be understood in today's terms when people had to run away from their homes. We have internal refugees here, and people stayed in a house that wasn't normally rented out. Right? I didn't know about it. The owner didn't know about it. The owner of the chatzer or the house did not know that there was somebody squatting in their house, and he slept there overnight. So if you live without the owner's knowledge, do you have to pay for him or not? Do you have to pay a one night's rent or not? So the question is, so Rav Meir asked, or the question was, hey, what's the case? If it's not normally rented out anyway, and the guy has other places he could have lived in anyway. He didn't gain anything. He didn't have any pleasure out of staying there. He stayed there. He has other places. He has other houses there, other apartments or other places that he didn't really gain anything out of it. He didn't save any money. It's not like he had to pay. He would have otherwise had to go to a hotel. He had other options. And the place isn't normally rented out anyway. So so the person who slept there, the squatter, has no pleasure because he could have slept next door where he has another house there. And the owner has no loss because the owner doesn't rent it out normally anyway. So what's the issue? Why should he have to pay him? This guy didn't get any pleasure and the owner didn't have to suffer any loss. Oh, maybe you're talking about a place which is normally rented out. And this guy went and squatted in there. And because he squatted in there, the owner couldn't rent it out. It was like, what do they call it? Airbnb. He was an Airbnb. He just went in there and the guy couldn't rent it out because it was occupied. So, and this guy normally does rent out. The squatter normally pays for a night's rent and the owner usually rents it out. So now by him occupying it for free, what do you mean for free? you cost me a loss of income and you normally have to pay anyway. So that's zen and chaser. The squatter had pleasure and the owner lost money. Of course he should pay. So let's read it. We're speaking about a case where the chutzner, the courtyard of the house, whatever, is not normally rented out. So the owner suffered no loss. The guy just stayed in his chutzner. Let's say he stayed in his chutzner. Let's make it simple. He didn't even have to ruin the beds or the bathroom or anything like that. He stayed in a chutzner. Right? Set up a tent there. He doesn't rent it out anyway. But the person, the squatter does usually rent out. He usually has to pay for his lodging. So what is this? Is a case of zenehena. The squatter had a pleasure, but the owner has suffered no loss. Zenem zelo chaser. What do you say with zenem zelo chaser? Normally we say, like there's a curse, zenem zelo chaser. I had pleasure. I come in sometimes, I see somebody use my tefillin, right? It bothers me, right? But it's zenehena. Somebody used it. The zelo chaser. I didn't really suffer any loss other than the inconvenience of unwrapping it in a different way, right? So that's zenehena zelo chaser. So what do you say there? That's the question that's raised here. Can the squatter say, listen, I haven't caused you any loss. What do you want from me? Why should I pay? Oh, Dilmore, do you say, he could say, oh, it's honest. You did have pleasure. You had some pleasure from me. You should pay for it. Normally, in a case where you have pleasure, you ate somebody's food, you stayed in their house and you would rent it out. Normally, fine. It didn't cost them any loss. So which one do you say? So Rabbi Bar Chama, who was posed this question by Rav Chisda, said, what kind of a kasha is that? It's a Mishnah. It's a fair Mishnah. It's not a Mishnah. He says, hey, must say some which Mishnah? Where is that a Mishnah? So Rabbi Chama played with him. He said, give me some pleasure. Do some service for me and I will let you know. I'll let you know the Mishnah. In other words, show me that you're eager for the answer and that you appreciate that I'm going to give you the answer. So Shakal said, he took his handkerchief or his shawl, whatever, and he folded it for him. He says, do me some service and I'll give you the answer. So he did some service. He took his shawl and he folded it neatly. Amalei, in the Hennes Mishnah, you know what the Mishnah is? Our Mishnah says that if the animal walking in the street ate your fruits, right? If your fruits, he's supposed to pay for the fruits at $10 because Shem B'Shus Rabim. But if he didn't have to eat lunch now because of that, so the owner got some pleasure out of it, he didn't have to serve him straw or barley, then he should pay for that. So this is a case of what? Zenehena v'zelo chaser? Zenehena v'zelo chaser? Why is this zelo chaser? The guy did lose the fruits, right? He lost his fruits. But that's what he told him. Amalei im nehenes, misham zehenes. Amar Rabba. Rabba says, listen to this. Before we get to the issue, he says, Kamalo choliv lo magish. How much suffering, anguish, and suffering or worry and anguish does a person gaver demari siade? A person who the Baruch Shalom helps, the master helps. How much worry and anxiety does he avoid? Meaning, Rabbi Bar Chama L'chara gave a very poor answer over here. He asked Makasha Zen and I squatted in your in your chaser. You don't rent it out normally anyway. So why should I pay you? It's Zenahan. I had pleasure, but you didn't lose anything because you don't rent it out anyway. I asked my question, and he answered him from a case of Zenahan of chaser because the fruits were lost to the owner. It's not Zenahan of chaser. The owner, the animal who ate it, his owner certainly had pleasure. He doesn't have to get him lunch now. But there is chaser over there. And this is not comparable. Rava says, wow, he accepted this answer? Even in this case, lo chaser is not comparable to our Mishnah. Rav Chisda accepted his answer. So you see that if you have siyata d'shmaya, even l'chor, if you make a mistake, the Rebbeinu Shalom takes care of you. You have no worries and no anxiety. Somebody that the Rebbeinu Shalom helps. Hi Zenahan of Zechaser, but our mission is Zenahan of Zechaser. Hi Zenahan of Zelo Chaser. The question was asked about a Zenahan of Zelo Chaser. The mission is Zenahan of Zechaser. Ram Barchama, how did he give the answer? He learned the Mishnah that in the Mishnah speaking about a case where you leave your fruits in the Rishus Harabim, so you're not losing anything because you expect to be lost. Who leaves their fruits in Rishus Harabim, fruits and vegetables in Rishus Harabim? For Shane, certainly you're putter, but even for Chaser, if you left your fruits and vegetables in Rishus Harabim, you effectively abandoned them. You made them hefker, mafker, and therefore there was no loss. And therefore, he says this Mishnah is also a case of Zenahena. The owner of the animal had pleasure because he didn't have to serve his animal lunch now after he ate the fruits. But the owner of the fruits didn't really lose anything because he already abandoned them. That's how Ram Barchama would understand the Mishnah. Okay, so this issue of Zenahena of Zelochaser, we tried. You could accept it from our Mishnah, but or you could say that's not really the case of Zenahena of Zelochaser. Ram Barchama says you're mafka them, but otherwise maybe you're not mafka them. Otherwise, what's the case of Shane? You say Shane b'shus harabim, if he eats b'shus harabim, you're putter, right? Because an animal normally eats there. Anybody leaves their stuff there, it's hefker. So what's the issue anyway? You could argue that too. Okay, let's go on with the issue of Zen and of Zelochaser. Tanan. We're going to have later. See the diagram in Rashi. Shimon has an internal field. He owns a field. Reuven has 3 fields around him. You see that? And Reuben had put up a perimeter. The black lines are perimeters on his outside facing other owners, other field owners. And he put up 3 mechitzos internally surrounding Shimon's field to separate him from Shimon. The animals shouldn't fight with one another, right? You shouldn't putting up a fence. So Reuben put up a fence around Shimon on 3 sides. He had fields. Reuben had fields on all 3 sides, as we see, and he put up a fence on those 3 sides. You're not mechayev Shimon to partake in the expenses of the fence, because he could say, "What did you do for me? I don't care. I'm still open. People could still come into me on the 4th side, right? My field is still exposed, so you're not mechayev." Haravias. Let's say Reuben though bought the 4th field surrounding Shimon totally now. Now he's surrounding Shimon totally, and he put up a fence there. So you can mechayev Shimon to partake also. Reuben put up the fence anyway. He didn't lose anything. He put up the fence for his own purposes to protect himself, right? And still Shimon had enough from it. So Zenahan of Zelo Chaser, you say if Reuben put up had a 4th field on the 4th side of Shimon and put up a fence there, it's mashma, you could force Shimon to partake in the expenses also, even though it's Zenahan of Zelo Chaser. Reuben had put up anyway. So the Gemara says, "Shani Yosem de Amalei Akuram Tali Akefi Seira." That's not a case of Zen of Zelo Chaser. Reuben could say, if I have 4 fields and you have a little field inside all my 4 fields, if it wouldn't be for you, I wouldn't have had to put up that fence at all. If you wouldn't be in the middle there, I wouldn't have had to put up the fence at all. So you did cause me a loss. Your presence caused me a loss. I had to put up that. I had the outer perimeters, the outer fences protect me from other field owners in that area. But I surround you on all 4 sides. If it wouldn't be for you, I wouldn't have to put up that internal fence at all. Therefore, it's Zenahan of Zechaser. You cost me part of the loss.
Doesn't it depend on when they acquired the field?
Why?
Because if Shimon had the field first,
it makes no difference.
And Reuben,
yes, and he bought them. So what?
So Shimon isn't doing anything. He isn't causing. Reuben is causing it to Shimon.
Okay, but everybody's entitled to have a field. Everybody's entitled to have a field. Neighbors move in. they put up a fence. I see there's a chilik, but I don't see why it's machalik. What's the difference? Once these people exist and he's around him, he wants to. They want to have separation. When Reuben wasn't there initially, fine. So they didn't need a fence. Now Reuben's there. They both need a fence. Shoot, smash me. You both have to pay. Yeah, yes. He could say, Reuben could say, if it wouldn't be for you, I know you were there first, but if it wouldn't be for you, I wouldn't have to put up a fence at all. I'm entitled to the property. I bought it legitimately. Toshma proved the other way. Rav Yossi disagrees. He says, Imama Nikif Fagodas Rabias. Let's say the Reuben put up the first three, right? Then he bought the fourth field. Now he's got a fourth field, whether he had the fourth field before, right? He has a fourth field there now, and there was no fence there. It makes really no difference if he had the fourth fence, if he had the fourth side before or not. The question is, when did he put it? And he fenced them in. Then you could force him to pay. Yossi says, listen, let's say the Nikif Shimon put up the fourth fence. There were three fences there before, right? The three sides. Then Shimon put up the fourth side. Then you make him pay for the first three also, because he's demonstrated that he's happy with the whole fencing issue. So if Shimon got up and fenced in the fourth side, you force him to pay for the first three. Time it a gar nikif, because he did it, because he himself did hamakif. But let's say the outer guy, Ruvain, put up the fourth fence, Mashmi Potter. He disagrees with the Tanakama. He says if the Makif put up the fourth side, you'd be Potter. Potter, right? Because again, you could say, Shimon could say, I'm having pleasure from it because you protected me, but you were putting it up anyway. I didn't cause you any loss. It says, the reason over there you could say why the Shimon is potter to pay if the outer guy put up the fourth fence, even though Shimon's getting pleasure, because Shimon could say, I didn't need such a fancy fence with bricks, and you put up a whole expensive fence. I could have sufficed with a fence of thorns. It cost $1.50 for the whole thing. So therefore, he could say, therefore you're potter. It's not a case of zenem zelochaser, you're potter. He could say, even if you say zenem zelochaser is chayiv, I don't have to put up a fence like you put up a fence. That was your prerogative. Tashma, let's look at it this way. Abayis Valiyah. Yeah, so you could pay the $1.50. Yeah, you could say, I would put up thorns, right? So for that, you could argue that he could say, you want to prove zenem zelochaser is potter. Could be zenem is chayiv, but over here he could say, I don't need such a fancy fence, and maybe indeed you would have to pay the $1.50 for the thorns. Tashma. Abayis Valiyah, you have a lower story, like in Israel, where you have apartments on the first floor and an apartment on the second floor. And they're each owned by two different people. Reuben lives downstairs, Shimon lives upstairs. And the whole thing fell down. So Shnaim Shenaflu. The whole thing fell down. Omer Bala Aliyah Balabayas. The guy from upstairs said to the guy from downstairs, live no, so build your I can't live on my property until you build yours, because I'm upstairs. You got to build yours, right? But who ain't a road? So the guy downstairs doesn't have the money, didn't have insurance. Talk about that later for your time. Who ain't a road? He doesn't want to pay. He doesn't want to build downstairs. So what is the upstairs supposed to do? Right? Hare Balaliyah, the guy from upstairs, bona bias, he could build it in the place of the downstairs guy, be Oshabon and live there. Until the other guy pays for him. He says, listen, I'm entitled to build my property. If your property is not built up, I'll build it on yours. And I'm going to stay there until you pay me for all my expenses of building. Pardon? Oh, so but he's entitled. We'll see. See, Yosef he only has to pay for the outlay for the expenses in building that apartment. Right? Low. What about trespassing, like you say? What about? Okay, fine. He's entitled to the other guy. The guy from upstairs can stay downstairs, because he basically built up the first guy's house. So when the first guy pays him, then he'll move out. But until he pays him, he's entitled to stay there. Fine, but why shouldn't he deduct for rent? Yes, I owe you money. If I want my house back, I should have to pay for the expenses of building the house. The guy from upstairs built the house downstairs. The guy downstairs wants that house. He should pay for it. Fine, pay for it. But when he pays for it, he should be able to deduct for the months of rent that guy slept downstairs. Hascharo lo. Shmamina zenen v'zelo chaser potter. Zenena, who had hana here? The upstairs guy, because he lived downstairs when he built it. V'zelo chaser, the downstairs guy didn't lose anything. He couldn't have stayed there anyway. He wasn't willing to build anything there. Zelachasar. You see Zenev Zelachasar's potter, right? He doesn't have to pay for the rent. Shani Osam, the base of Aliyah Mishtamid. That's different over there. Because the downstairs house is obligated to the upstairs guy. No, the upstairs guy wants to build, but he can't build if the downstairs guy didn't build his. So there it's different because it's not that he gave Manoah for nothing. The downstairs guy is obligated to put his house, to build his house so that the upstairs guy could have it. It's not like it's just, they're not two independent houses on two different properties. The upstairs guy's house lives on, his house is placed on top of the downstairs guy. The downstairs guy is meshubed, is obligated to build his house, to give him a place for his house to stand on. So that case is different, and you can't prove the Zen and Zalchasar's potter. Tashma, again, Rav Yehuda's other opinion. Rav Yehuda says, this is a case of the upstairs guy living in the downstairs guy's property without permission, without asking him. He's got to pay for it. He's got to pay rent. Over here it's Zenahana. The upstairs guy's having an awe again, and the downstairs guy is not losing anything. So you see that you're chayiv to pay because he says you have to pay the rent. Yes, if he wants if the downstairs guy wants the house back, he's got to pay the expenses of the building. But he'd have to pay the rent. The upstairs guy has the obligation to pay the rent. He says, no, shiny also mishum shecharisa dashiyasa. It's different over there. You know why? Because in a new house, it takes a while for the walls from you live down there with fuel and fire and stuff like that, the walls get darkened. In an old house, it's already in place. It doesn't have an effect. But in a new house that are whitewashed, let's say, the walls get darkened. So therefore, it's not the Zanan of Azol Chasser. There is Chasser. The owner of downstairs is losing something because eventually he'll pay for the expenses of building that apartment on the first floor, right? That he'll pay for the expenses of building. But also, now the building, he's not getting a new building. He's getting a used building because it's got, now the walls have been darkened by the guy living in there. And therefore, he's got to pay rent because, so it's not Zen Hanav Azol Chasser, it's Zen Hanav Chasser. Because the owner, the downstairs guy who didn't build yet, but his eventual apartment that was built by the upstairs guy has been used. So he's got some loss to it. So therefore you can't prove it.
He's nene because he didn't have to do the work.
He's nene from, no, he's going to pay for that. In other words, for the building of the apartment, the downstairs guy, the upstairs guy can live down there until the other guy pays for it. The downstairs guy doesn't want to build. There's nothing to talk about.
Yes,
but when he pays for it, he has to pay less because he can deduct for the rent.
The old house that was broken.
There's nothing left. It's gone.
Yeah, it was already walls were already got there.
No, but there's no. These are new walls though. Those walls. Right. But yes, but when eventually the downstairs guy pays the upstairs guy for building his apartment, he's going to pay the full amount of a new apartment, but he's going to deduct for the rent because there was some damage done by living in there. When people live in your apartment, a lot of people are finding that out now. They help people from the south to the north, and then when they leave, they realize that they got to do a whole shiputz because they came in there with 7, 8 kids and wrecked the place. That's what happens. Okay. Shalchur, this question of Zanan and Zelo Chaser, Shalchur Bei Ravami. They sent this to the Shiur Ravami. Omar, he said, listen, Zanan and Zelo Chaser, Prima Salo, this question of, you lived in your house, the question that was raised by Rav Chisda mentioned Rav Mechama, that you lived in somebody else's chatzer without their knowledge, do you have to pay? So he answered, why should you have to pay? What damage did he do? What damage did he do? He didn't do anything. He lived in your chutzner, like you say, you put up a tent and a sleeping bag on somebody else's chutzner. What did he do to him? What caused him? What damage did he do? He didn't do anything. You shouldn't have to pay. But let's think about it. Let's consider it. Then they sent the question again to Rav Chia Bar Abba. He didn't get any answer. So he asked him again. Omar, you keep sending me the same question again. If I would find the svara for it, if I find a reason, wouldn't I have sent it to you? In other words, it's a good question. Again, you have two ways of looking at it. One hand, the guy with Chaser could say you had pleasure. The other guy could say I didn't cause you any loss. You weren't renting it out anyway. So what loss? This is a good question. If I would have an answer, I would answer you. We'll see that's the psak. You see the Ram Seich in here too. The Zanan of Zelo Chaser doesn't have to pay. If I came and squatted in your yard and you don't rent it out anyway normally, and I caused you no loss, it wasn't like I caused you a loss. I ruined your bed of roses or something. I caused you no loss. You don't have to pay. Zanan Zelo Chaser. Ravu though said Rabbi Yochanan Sarach, he's got to pay. Amar Papa, Hadar Ravu. Rav Papa says Ravu is incorrect when he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan you have to pay.
Rabbi Yochanan never really said you have to pay. Why? He didn't hear directly from Rabbi Yochanan saying you have to pay. He heard it from, he deduced it from a story. What happened? The Tana Natal Evan Akora, a gizbar of Hegdish, is allowed to keep Hegdish's money in his pocket because he got to use it. Let's say he took a beam, a beam of Hegdish. If he took it, he's allowed to. He's allowed to walk around with it because he didn't change Rishus. Didn't commit sacrilege yet. But if he gave it to somebody else, let's say if he gave it, took it out of the Rishus of Hegdish by transferring it to somebody else, that's Me'ilah, and he has to pay. Not the Chaver doesn't pay, the Gizra has to pay. Let's say the Gizra Banalobe, so he built it in his own house. He built in his house, until he lived there. In other words, we'll see. He didn't actually construct it and nail it into the house, because then it would have been Mila right away. Until he lived under there for he left it, in other words, he didn't really change the nature of the beam. He didn't saw it off or nail it or do anything to it. He just left it on the skylight. So if he had enough from it, once he had enough from living under it, then he's chayav, because if otherwise he would have been chayav before. Rabbi was sitting for Rabbi Yochanan. He said, "Name Shmuel Zosameres Hador b'Chatz Chaver Shlomi Daito Tzarach Lo Zaschar." Who owns this? Who owns this beam? Hegdish, right? And you're living b'Chatz Chavero. And this man, what do we say? He says, if you put it, if he nailed the beam into his moel right away. But over here he says he's not moel until he lives under it and had enough of Shavapruta. But just right until he had some enough from it. But it's not from a Shmuel. That's only left with you because he was molding it when he had enough from it. So he said from over here, you see from here, you got to pay because he's moel and hegdish, even though it's shlomi daito, because the hegdish doesn't have any owner, and it's like you live in shlomi daito. But once you had enough shavaput, you have to pay. It's the story. And Rabbi Yochanan was quiet about that. So his mashma, Rabbi Abu thought, since Rabbi Yochanan was quiet, modala, he's moda, and you see from here, Zosameres, that if you live in somebody else's chutzner without their knowledge, you have to pay anyway. Zen adam zelo chasser. Again, it's lo chasser because the beam is intact, right? Zen adam zelo chasser. You still have to pay. Below not true. Ashkuchi lashkich, Rabbi Yochanan paid no attention to him. Kidarabba, Damarabba, Hegdish Shlomidas. Hegdish without, what do you mean Hegdish does it without the knowledge? Rabban Shalom knows where it is. The Hegdish belongs to Rabban Shalom. So it's not, there's no such thing as Hegdish Shalom Midas, right? Hegdish Midas is like Hegdish Midas Dami. And therefore, this is not a case of what? Of Zen of Zelo Chaser. We didn't know about it. This he knew about it. So it's not a case of Zen and it's not a Darba. It's not a case of Adorba Chatzmei Shlomi Daito Tzarach Lo Zaschar. This is, it's like it's Midaito. It's like he understood what was going on and he expected payment, like the case of sacrilege. So therefore, the psak is that Rabbi Yochanan really holds that end of Zalachaser, you don't have to pay. This is Rabu said in Rabbi Yochanan that you do have to pay. Rabbi Yochanan never said that. Simply Rabbi Abu deduced it from this story because Rabbi Abu said to Rabbi Yochanan, you see from over here, in the name, he said in the name of Shmuel, you see, you have to pay. Not true. Not true. Rabbi Yochanan paid no attention to him because that's not a case like this at all. This is not Shlomi Daito. Hegdish is always Midat. So therefore, the psak is that Zen and Avzel Chaser, you do have to pay. We see that from Rabbi Yochanan. And tomorrow's Gemara will continue with this some more cases that also proving that Zen and Avzel Chaser, you don't have to pay. If I have enough, and you had no loss, without no loss. Obviously, if you knew about it and there was an agreement, you have to pay. But if it's then an absolute chasr, you didn't know about any causing any loss, you don't have to pay. And I'll pick up here tomorrow. Just as a point, here, especially in Israel, where people live in apartments, people don't realize that there's different kinds of insurance. You insure your house. I'm not talking about for stealing or robbing or something like that. I'm talking about the house itself. Let's say your house collapses. You're in an apartment house, right? House collapses, so you're insured, right? You're insured for the value of the house. But if you live in an apartment house on the 5th floor and the other 4 guys below you don't want to build, what are you going to do? The insurance company will give you money for the stones, right? But what are you supposed to do? If you have to go buy an apartment somewhere else, it costs you a lot more. So there's a different kind of insurance. There's insurance, I found this out, I didn't know this from all these years. There's another kind of insurance that you pay a little bit more. but it's called, I forgot the name in Hebrew, there's a name for it, I forgot what it's called, something karka, that you're insured not just for the value of rebuilding it, but if you're in a building where the other owners, the whole thing fell down, and it's whatever, you're not covered, the other guys aren't covered, and they're not going to rebuild. They're not going to rebuild. We had cases, the case in Chulon where the whole thing collapsed. There was a big issue about that. That what are you going to do? So that you have insurance to buy an equivalent apartment, that give you money not just for rebuilding, but for buying another apartment, which is a lot more money, right? Your apartment's worth more than the cost of just building the stones, putting it together. Market value.